Antioch, 260 AD. A silversmith named Marcus has spent 30 years working with metal. He knows silver the way a baker knows dough, the weight of it, the colour, the faint resistance when you press your thumbnail into a freshly minted coin. This morning a merchant paid him 8 denarii for a week of skilled work. Marcus holds the coins in his palm and something is wrong. They are the right size. They carry the right face, the emperor's profile stamped clearly on the front. But they feel wrong, lighter than they should be. He bites one. The surface is silver, but beneath it, just barely beneath it, something base and dull. He walks to the market. A modius of wheat, which last year cost 2 denarii, now costs 8. The merchant selling it shrugs. He has seen this too. Everyone has seen this. The coins keep coming from the imperial mint, more of them every month, and every month they buy a little less. Marcus has a jar of older denarii hidden under the floor of his workshop. Coins from 40 years ago, from the reign of Septimius Severus, nearly 50% silver, pure enough to ring when you drop them on stone. He will not spend those he keeps. He does not know the word debasement. He does not know that in Rome the imperial treasury has been quietly reducing the silver content of each coin for 2 centuries. He only knows what his hands tell him. Something is being taken from him, slowly, invisibly, by people he will never meet, and there is nothing he can do about it. That silversmith is not a historical character, but he represents tens of thousands of real people who lived through exactly this, whose savings, held in the official currency of the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, were drained away by a process most of them could feel but never quite name. I went through the forensics, the numismatic records, the papyri from Roman Egypt, the documented price data for wheat, wine, and labour across 3 centuries. What Rome did to its currency, and what that did to its people, is not what most people expect. By the end of this video you will know exactly how it happened, who survived, what assets held their value, and what the pattern looks like before anyone in power admits there is a problem. Let's open the autopsy. Rome in the 1st century AD was, by the standards of the ancient world, something almost miraculous. A single currency, the silver denarius, circulated from Britain to Egypt. A Roman merchant could travel the full length of the Mediterranean in relative safety, paying for food, lodging, and goods with the same coins. Under the reign of Augustus, restored to nearly 98% silver, it was the most trusted coin in the world. For nearly 300 years, Rome maintained a currency that was essentially what it claimed to be. A denarius was a denarius. You could bite it, weigh it, melt it. The silver was there. That consistency was the foundation on which an empire-wide trade network was built, on which contracts were written, on which soldiers trusted their pay. Then came the pressures, wars on multiple frontiers, an expanding army demanding more pay, emperors competing for loyalty through lavish spending and public spectacles, the costs of maintaining a vast empire without the revenue from new conquest to cover them. The solution emperors reached for was simple and invisible. Take in coins as taxes, melt them down, add a little more copper, mint new coins at the same face value, pay the bills. It started under Nero in 64 AD, after the Great Fire of Rome. Nero reduced the silver content from nearly 99% to around 90%. To the average Roman, the change was barely perceptible. The coins looked the same, the emperor's portrait was the same, they were accepted at the same face value, but the money changers noticed. The merchants who handled thousands of coins noticed. And crucially, as the historian Tacitus recorded, the Germanic tribes beyond the border noticed too. They began specifically requesting older Roman coins, the pre-Nero denarii, in payment for trade. They understood, instinctively, that not all denarii were equal. Once the door to debasement was opened, it proved impossible to close. Emperor after emperor reduced the silver content further, always with a plausible reason. Military campaigns, plague relief, border defences, each individual debasement was small enough to rationalise. Each emperor could tell himself his adjustment was minor and necessary. Collectively, they were catastrophic. By the time of Septimius Severus around the year 200, the denarius was 50% silver. By the 260s, it was under 5%. Here is the crucial detail. When Nero debased the currency, prices did not immediately rise. The adjustment took time, sometimes years, sometimes a decade. This lag made debasement politically irresistible. An emperor could debase today and enjoy the short-term benefit. His successors would inherit the inflation. A measure of wheat that cost 6 drachmas in Roman Egypt in the 1st century AD had risen to 200 drachmas by 276. That is more than 3,000% inflation over roughly 2 centuries. And then the 3rd century arrived. What happened between 235 and 284 AD is recorded as the crisis of the 3rd century. In that 50-year period, over 50 different men claimed the title of emperor. Most were military commanders proclaimed by their own troops. Most were killed by those same troops when a rich arrival appeared. The average reign lasted less than 2 years. Each new emperor faced the same immediate problem. He needed money to pay the military's accession bonus, the gift expected by every soldier whenever a new emperor took power. Without it, loyalty was uncertain. The solution was always the same: debase the currency. The silver content of the denarius collapsed from 50% to under 5% in a single generation. By the reign of Gallienus in the 260s, the coins were bronze cores with a thin silver wash. That wash wore off within weeks of circulation. By 268, the silver content had fallen to half of 1%. The coin was silver in name only. The effects were no longer gradual. Prices in some parts of the empire rose by close to 1,000% in a single generation. Soldiers demanded higher pay because their coins bought less, which meant emperors debased further to meet those demands, which drove prices higher still. The cycle fed itself until the currency stopped being trusted. In the provinces, merchants began refusing imperial coins altogether, demanding older coins with intact silver content, or accepting only gold, or returning to barter. Rome's vast internal trade network, which had moved goods from Britain to Egypt in relative safety, began to fragment. Roads became dangerous. Merchants stayed home. The interconnected economy of the Pax Romana dissolved region by region into something smaller, more local, more desperate. Here is what matters for this channel. This was readable decades before the worst of it arrived. The direction of debasement never reversed for more than a brief reign. Every emperor who promised monetary reform quietly continued the policy when fiscal pressure mounted. The trend was visible to anyone who weighed coins, compared prices year over year, or simply paid attention to what their savings bought today versus 5 years ago. The silversmith Marcus, holding his debased coins and comparing them to the older ones under his floor, was already reading the signal. He just did not know what to do with it. Let me give you the forensic breakdown. 3 things survived the Roman monetary collapse. 3 things did not. Productive land under direct personal control was the most durable asset through the entire crisis. When trade networks collapsed and the denarius became worthless, food became the fundamental unit of value. The landowner who could grow wheat and olives on his own estate, process them with his own workers, and trade locally with nearby neighbours did not need the currency to function. Historians have documented how, during the crisis of the 3rd century, large landowners in the western provinces gradually stopped exporting cash crops for money and shifted to subsistence and local barter. This was not a philosophy. It was adaptation. The self-sufficient estate was what replaced the imperial trade network as that network dissolved. Physical gold and older, purer silver coins outside the institutional system. The Roman elite understood instinctively what economists would later call Gresham's law. When 2 coins carry the same face value but different intrinsic value, people spend the worse one and hoard the better one. Older, higher silver denarii disappeared from circulation as people kept them and spent debased new ones. Gold aureus coins, debased less aggressively than the silver, retained real value relative to the collapsing denarius. By the mid-3rd century, real values were being calculated in gold. The ratio of gold to silver denarii, which had been 25 to 1 under Augustus, reached 1,000 to 1 by the 260s. The people who held gold measured their wealth in something that held. The people who held debased denarii watched their savings erode. Note what the barbarian mercenaries demanded. The emperors increasingly relied on Germanic tribes to fill the army ranks. These warriors insisted on being paid in gold, not denarii, gold. Their financial instincts were more precisely calibrated than those of many Roman citizens. They understood that the face value of the denarius was a promise from an institution with a track record they could evaluate. Practical skills and local community relationships. The collapse of long-distance trade threw people back onto what existed within walking distance. The craftsman, the farmer, the physician, the builder, these were people whose value was immediate and local and could not be inflated away. The regions that held up best during the crisis, Egypt and parts of North Africa among them, maintained functioning local economies that operated largely outside the debased imperial currency. They exchanged goods, organised labour, and recorded debts through social relationships, not through the imperial monetary infrastructure. Now, what went to zero? Cash savings held in denarii. The math is brutal. A Roman citizen who in the year 150 held 100 denarii of savings had coins that were roughly 75% silver. A Roman citizen holding those same 100 denarii in the year 270 held coins that were barely 2% silver. Face value unchanged. Purchasing power gone. The government had transferred wealth from savers to itself, incrementally, over a century, through a mechanism most citizens could sense but never quite name. Urban commerce dependent on the empire-wide trade network. The great merchant cities of Rome required safe roads, trusted currency, and empire-wide supply chains to function. When all three failed, urban populations fell sharply. People left the cities for the countryside in search of food and protection. The historian Henry Moss described Rome's pre-crisis trade network as something unprecedented in previous history, not repeated for centuries afterward. It did not survive the debasement of the currency that had held it together, every financial promise denominated in denarii, government contracts, pension rights, debt obligations. When the denarius lost 98% of its silver content over 2 centuries, every promise denominated in denarii lost its real value proportionally. The government continued to honour the face value. The face value meant almost nothing. The Roman experience does not belong to Rome. The mechanism is the same one that has appeared in every society that has separated its currency from a hard anchor and then faced the fiscal pressure to debase it. The pattern is consistent. A government faces costs it cannot cover through taxation or genuine revenue. Raising taxes directly is politically dangerous. The easier path is to quietly expand the money supply, whether by reducing silver content or by other means. The first expansion is largely invisible. The second is less so. By the time ordinary people feel the effects, years or decades of the policy are already embedded in the system. The Roman denarius was the reserve currency of the ancient world. It was the dollar of its era. For 3 centuries it held its value with remarkable discipline. Then the fiscal pressures accumulated, institutional discipline failed, and the debasement began. It started at less than 10%. It ended at 98% gone. The process took 2 centuries. The final collapse took a generation. The historian Kevin Butcher, writing on Roman coinage debasement, described the final stage in terms that could apply to almost any monetary collapse. The currency had been, in his translation of the ancient sources, carried to the point of frenzy. By the end, even the state that had created the policy could no longer use it. What replaced the monetary system was not a reform. It was a reorganization of society around the structures that had survived because they did not depend on the currency. The Roman forensic record points to 4 things that preserved wealth through a debasement that lasted 2 centuries and destroyed the monetary system of the most powerful empire in human history. First, productive land or food capacity under your direct personal control, not financial exposure to agricultural commodities, actual productive capacity that functions regardless of what currency is doing. The landowners who made it through the crisis of the 3rd century and relative stability shifted away from cash crop dependency before the network collapsed around them. The adaptation worked better for those who moved early. Second, physical gold and high-quality silver held outside the institutional system. Not paper claims on precious metals, not accounts denominated in precious metals, physical metal you hold directly. The Roman citizens who preserved real wealth were the ones hoarding older, purer coins, while spending debased new ones for daily transactions. Skills cannot be debased. Gold could not be minted by decree. Third, practical skills with immediate local value. The physician, the miller, the stonemason, the farmer. The people who came through best were those whose value was expressed in what they could do, not in what their account balance said. Whatever a government does to the currency, the person who can repair a roof, treat a wound, or grow food retains something unreachable. Fourth, community and local relationships built before they were needed. The regions that maintained the most stability were those with the strongest pre-existing local infrastructure. When the long-distance trade network collapsed, what replaced it was whatever existed at the local level. The communities with those relationships already in place fared better than those entirely dependent on the imperial system. What is notably absent from this list is anything requiring the imperial monetary system to remain functional and trustworthy. The denarius was the reserve currency of its world. It had been stable and trusted for 3 centuries, and then it was not. The people who had positioned themselves to survive without it did. The people who assumed it would remain what it had always been discovered, over decades of slow erosion, that it would not. Marcus the silversmith will close this out. He's back in his workshop 2 decades after that morning in the market. The crisis has deepened. The Emperor has changed 3 times this year. The coins coming out of the Imperial Mint are barely silver at all, a bronze core with a surface that flashes briefly in the light and then dulls. His workshop still operates. He still has clients. But he is paid in grain now, partly, or in older coins from his own supply, which he releases carefully, 1 or 2 at a time, keeping the rest under the floor. He did not understand monetary theory. He did not predict the crisis of the 3rd century. He simply paid attention to what his hands told him, kept assets that did not depend on the government's promises, built relationships with the farmers and merchants nearby, and kept working. The Empire's money collapsed. The silversmith's workshop did not. The question history always asks is not whether a currency will be debased. The answer to that, across every major civilization that has separated its money from a hard anchor, has been remarkably consistent. The question is only whether you are positioned before the coins in your pocket become lighter than they used to be. If this forensic breakdown gave you a new lens, subscribe to Independent Financial Historian. This channel examines what actually happened, the documented evidence, the real outcomes, so you can read the situation before it reaches you. Drop a hammer and anvil in the comments if you are already building the protocol. Tell me what you want me